Tendamwari, our resident guest, Brother Leader Mbandaka. We've covered quite a bit today from our very hard-working leading sisters in our community, Queen Mother Nzinga and Sister Maxine Davis, on this very important discussion regarding Sister ASSATA Shakur. What's your take on all of this, Brother Leader? I mean, there's a lot of talk about motives from the American government, smoke screen. What's your take?
Tendamwari?
Yes. Yeah.
Are we in business?
You certainly are in business now, Brother Leader Mbandaka. Yeah.
Okay, well, I just want to give honor to the two wonderful warrior queens that we've just interviewed on the issue of the attack from the American government against our great queen warrior activist, Mama ASSATA Shakur. You ask what my take is on the matter. First and foremost, we know that Queen Mother ASSATA Shakur has a long history of activism against the oppression of African people. She is and has been a freedom fighter, and we heard her voice earlier on declaring herself to be a freedom fighter. She remains a freedom fighter for the liberation of her people. Why is it necessary for any African to declare themselves a freedom fighter for the liberation of our people? It is precisely because our people are in a state of oppression. The context in which Sister ASSATA Shakur was accused of murdering a police officer was, we must understand that she was already on the books of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and already under the surveillance of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and that she had on several occasions before this incident which happened on May the 2nd, 1973, she had been for at least 2 years prior to that consistently and repeatedly arrested on all kinds of trumped-up charges, which turned out which came to naught because, as was stated in the spec, she was either acquitted or these charges were thrown out of court. So it is important that brothers and sisters understand that there was a concerted effort to pin something against her, accuse her of some serious law breaking that would justify imprisoning her. In the final analysis, it was this incident that happened on May the 2nd, 1973, where she was said to have shot a police officer dead, allegedly with his own gun. This was in a shootout. Question: how did she get close enough in a shootout to the police officer to use his gun to shoot him? They did not find any gun on her. She was wounded when they found her, 2 gunshot wounds in the back, mind you. Through the one was through her shoulder, upper shoulder, from the rear, which shattered her collarbone as the wound exited, which rendered her the use of her arm disabled. So for all of those reasons, plus the fact that no forensic evidence was found connecting her with any weapon, eliminates any possibility that she could have fired a weapon on that day. Tendamwari.
Tendamwari 94 FM, www.voiceofafricaradio.com. Tendamwari, Brother Leader. Yes, you were just informing us about really your understanding of what is taking place here.
Tendamwari, I just thought it was necessary just to expand the background that we've already been given, so brothers and sisters will understand the context in which this great African queen is now facing this onslaught from the American government. And I started talking about an incident that happened in 1971. The government has attempted to convict her for some kind of felony since 1971, and there's been a myriad of charges that has been brought against her. Even in one instance, in April 1971, when she was shot in the stomach, she was arrested and she was charged for attempted robbery and various other felonies that she was charged for. That, I think, that case was one of many that was thrown out of court, or she was acquitted. There's been a number of them.
Yeah.
So the incident of May the 2nd, 1973 was a culmination of a long history of surveillance and attempts to incarcerate our sister. It's against that backdrop that we must understand why she was accused and charged and later convicted of a crime, although there was no forensic evidence that linked her with any gun that was used in that incident, or even that any forensic evidence showing any residue on her hand or any other part of her body that would be consistent with someone who had fired a gun. Tendai Mari.
Now, thank you for that, brother leader. There are those that say that ASSATA Shakur has brought this on herself. She was convicted and imprisoned, albeit that she claims that it was on false evidence.
Yeah.
There are those that said that she could have used the same system to free herself by going to the proper appeal processes and so forth and so forth. By her escaping from prison, has now forced the government to act in this way. What would you say to that?
So, do you mean like, for instance, Mumia Abu Jamal, who's been on death row for the last 30 odd years? Well, last year, his death sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. But appeals have not worked for him in terms of delivering justice. He's still incarcerated. Do you mean like Matula Shakur, the brother of ASSATA Shakur, who is still behind bars, and who is also the victim, reportedly and evidently, of trumped-up charges? He has also appealed. He is still in prison since 1986.
Some may say that she made it difficult for them.
But when we come back from this, call,
yeah.
I want to explain to you, Sister ASSATA Shakur's own explanation as to why she had to, for her own life.
Okay.
She had to escape from the prison.
0208 180 2523. Call now on 07961 573 883 or 0208 180 2523. Text 07904 899 195.
The question that we are posing this evening, brothers and sisters: ASSATA Shakur, 2 million bounty, unrepentant terrorist or victim of Obama's politic. Is ASSATA Shakur guilty of murder? Is she a terrorist? Is Mama Assata's life now in more danger? Is the US government trying to whitewash the history of COINTELPRO? If no person is above the law, why have no COINTELPRO agents been convicted? Are too many Africans afraid to criticize Obama? Can African support for Obama still be justified? Or does this case have nothing to do with Obama? What is the INAP position on ASSATA Shakur? Okay, Tanamori, brother leader Mbandaka, let us get back to where we left off. And just saying to brothers, the lines are open, so please feel free to phone in at any time, especially if the first time you're hearing about ASSATA Shakur. If it is, then, what kind of impact has this information had on you? Now, brother leader, as I think I was saying earlier, there are some people that say she brought it on herself. She could have used the due process, appealing, hearing her case again, and so forth and so on. By her escaping, she has brought this on her own head.
Well, Tenai Mari, as I've said, we have, brothers and sisters, a myriad of, we have legions of political prisoners in the American prison system right now as we speak. And I mentioned a couple of names. I can mention other names. I could mention G. Jagger, or otherwise known as Geronimo Pratt, who, yes, eventually the system worked for him, but that was 27 years later. He spent 27 years in prison before he was released eventually on appeal, because it was then accepted that he was convicted on false or unsafe evidence. The same with Dhoruba bin Wahad, who spent nearly 20 years in prison before he was eventually released for, as a result of his appeal process. ASSATA Shakur explains to us that she was placed into a cell, and between two gun towers, she was beaten and she was abused by prison wardens in that prison. And she knew that if she did not escape, she would not have come out of that prison alive. What we must understand is that the incident for which she was arrested and charged for murder, she was a wounded victim of that incident. She was shot twice. I think it would be a clear deduction that the intention was to kill her. She was shot in 1971 as well, through the stomach. By the mercy of the Almighty and the spirit of our ancestors, she remained alive. She did not die. However, clearly again there was an attempt to assassinate her. On that occasion, she ended up being charged with robbery. So she knew that if she did not escape from that prison, she would not come out alive. And that is why she had to find a way out. That is why she knew that she had to. Her safety and security would not be dependent on the law of the land of America. That America was not going to deliver justice to her. But can I just pick up this on this issue of terrorism?
Go ahead, please.
Of her being branded a terrorist. And what they've done is really raise the bounty and raise the status of the label, the terrorist label that they put on her, because I believe it was in 2005 that they first labeled her a terrorist and put a bounty of $1 million on her. Prior to that, her status was a fugitive. So they were pursuing her as a fugitive, and she became a terrorist in 2005. And now she is being placed on the 10 most wanted list of terrorists. It beggars belief, that this is 40 years on. The woman is 65 years of age and getting older. Yes? She has been away from America. If we understand, there's a terrorism, there's a legal definition of terrorism in international law. I don't have it word for word, but it includes acts of violence against a civilian population, carrying out wanton acts of violence against a civilian population. Which civilian population in America or anywhere else in the world has ASSATA Shakur carried out any acts of violence against? There was an incident for which she was accused of shooting a police officer, an incident in which she herself was shot, an incident in which there is no forensic evidence linking her to any weapon at all or any weapon used in that incident. That is the bottom line. And she is quite clear that she is innocent and that she was one of a number of victims that the American government, through its COINTELPRO program, had earmarked for assassination or for incarceration. Yes? And when we talk about incarceration, we're talking about locking her up and throwing away the key, as in the case of Mumia Abu Jamal. These cases need to be studied. And we must understand that there are a number of African freedom fighters who were assassinated under the same COINTELPRO program. COINTELPRO stands for Counterintelligence Program of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. And what we must understand, in the spec it mentioned the church committee, which is a state Senate select committee, which did a study in governmental operations carried out by FBI and other intelligence agencies. And that church committee found that the FBI used a number of illegal forms of methods of investigation in order to secure convictions or in order to implicate civilians into alleged crimes. No, that's very, very serious. And ASSATA SHAKUR comes within the context of a number of political prisoners who were convicted on that kind of unsafe evidence. That's what we're dealing with here. And so we have to question the motive in upping the ante and tying her name up with the terrorist hype, and what the purpose of that is. And it is justifiable that we should be now concerned about her safety and what appears to be a message that has been sent out that it's open season, that anyone can take the life of ASSATA SHAKUR and there'll be $2 million in it for them. That's a very, very serious matter. And just to say very quickly, just to remind our listeners, or to inform our listeners if we don't know, that the FBI's counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, the aim of COINTELPRO was, and I read from the document which I have in front of me, a COINTELPRO document which I have in front of me. The purpose of this new counterintelligence endeavor is to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalist, so-called hate group organizations and groupings, their leadership spokesmen, membership, and supporters. Now, remember, they call it hate groups, but remember, Martin Luther King Jr. was included in the so-called hate groups, and his organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Council, because they were also organizing and mobilizing against the injustices and the racism that was being meted out against African people in the United States of America. And finally, just to add very quickly, I'll just read the first objective of the counterintelligence program was to prevent the coalition of militant black nationalist groups. In unity, there is strength, and there is truism, a truism that is no less valid for all its triteness. An effective coalition of black nationalist groups might be the first step towards a real Mau Mau in America. So America is casting itself in the role of the British colonialists in Kenya. And the second, very quickly, objective was to prevent the rise of the black messiah who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. And it mentions Malcolm X, and it mentions Martin Luther King, etc., etc. So I just want to give brothers and sisters the context of this COINTELPRO program in all its injustices.
Thanks, Brother Leader. I know there's so much more to say, but we don't have the time to say it in. Your closing words, Brother Leader Mbandaka, your closing statement, as always.
Well, Tendai Mwari, brothers and sisters, let us pull together and let us form a coalition of community and Pan-Africanist organizations, African liberation organizations, and let's get working together under the auspices of the National African People's Parliament. And I close, as I always do, in the words of the most eminent prophet and king, His Excellency Marcus Messiah Garvey: unite, organize now or perish. Rise, you mighty African people, for you can accomplish whatever you will. Tendai Mwari.